those who have been given other tasks that today they have also signed, perhaps they have signed their performance contracts in different ministries or departments. And one thing I know very well is that now each and every person must mimic what the president have said, so long as you have been given responsibility. And one of the things that you need to do in your backyard where you are providing leadership, and of course overseeing people who have been given, who have signed their performance contracts, is that time is not an excuse. And the president knows that if you don't keep time, then you are not performing. One other thing that he has came out with, he didn't just mention, like many other presidents or leaders before, when they identify issues that affects the larger population, they always often just mention and then leave it out and leave the public to decide. He has decided, and he said he wants a written explanation as to why they were supposed to, as to why they had to come late on a very critical thing, like the deputy president said. That was their ceremony. It's their day. I know they have not signed performance contracts from the onset of when they had been given the task. Probably there were quite a number of things which has picked up, or which I have picked up in terms of why. One, I know in the previous government there was an oversight prime cabinet, and now the task of the prime cabinet has been elaborated very well, and his task is to oversee the cabinet's performances. And therefore one of the tasks he was given was that to make sure that he creates a proper performance contract document that each and every person knows that it doesn't have a gap in terms of why one shouldn't have performed at that particular time. The other thing he has put very well in terms of performance contract is because I know the financial year was not the one that this government put. This was the 2022-2023 financial year. And of course you could give tasks to some people or for them to deliver, and yet there was this issue of being said that the previous government has emptied the coffer of the treasury, and therefore they couldn't perform based on lack of resources. You can't perform anything. So if you sign a performance contract with people at that particular level, then it will be very difficult for them to deliver as well.
Let me head over to Wakili. Wakili, you've just heard the president, of course, talking about the corruption, even terming it as a chronic illness within not just various ministries, the public sector, but the private sector as well. You have just heard him. He has just announced some measures. He has talked about the pay bill numbers in various ministries shall be shut down, and since today, from the 1st of August till the end of this particular administration's time for the next 5 years, it shall be the pay bill of the Treasury up and running as well. Will that even curb the corruption menace that we have been witnessing in the public sector?
Thank you so much for inviting me for this show. I want to say that now our president has started leading from the front. And I guess we can give it to him that now he has woken up to and risen up to the occasion. This is the kind of president I've been knowing all along. I was wondering for the last 1 year where he was. But as Dr. has put it, could be it's because he didn't have the funds, the budget had not been passed, and he didn't want to task his people vis-a-vis lack of resources. So he wants them to work from a point of comfort when he knows, I've given you a certain amount of money, and let me task you to see what it is that you can do. Let me see your performance out of it. Constitutionally, the president has spoken to the heart of the Constitution because he's talking about accountability. But accountability aside, there is the aspect of contracting. He has been contracted by the Kenyans, and he answers to Kenyans. So he has risen up to the occasion that you people gave me work, let me do the work. And how best do you do this work? By tasking the people you've put in place to ensure that they adhere to the conditions and terms under which you want to operate. That is when now you lay your philosophy, you start telling them, this is what I expect out of you. Previously, everybody has been running around. Some ministers have been going around even abusing neighboring states. Others have been running around saying, oh, we are going to do farming in Zambia, and then we pay farmers in Zambia and bring food here, which does not make sense. From here is when we want to start seeing clear-cut measures which have been put by government to alleviate the poverty in Kenya. The president is also anticipating a scenario whereby there are supposed to be talks which are on the offing with the opposition in terms of how do we steer this country ahead, how do we reduce the cost of living, and I think he has already jumped into the tray fast, so that he lays the strategy from his side, because when you talk with the opposition, they can only give you suggestions. The task has got to be performed by you, and that is, I think, what he has started on.
And of course,
just on the corruption issue that Wakili has put it very well, I think the president has gone down to the bottom of the whole issue by even identifying an officer in Ministry of Transport.
Yes.
I wish, again, on the other statement that he has made, that just take note of this, as he mentions to his CSS and PSS, that if I know more than you do with what you are supposed to do in your ministry, just know that there is a problem. And the problem is, when he mentioned someone just down there in the ministry saying this person is untouchable.
Yes.
I wish he could also mention some few other people in the Ministry of Lands, some registrars, senior registrars, people who have made money out of the public by snatching their property or putting them in a very awkward situation. I think those are the ministries. There are quite a number of ministries that need to be cleaned up. And of course, we don't just ask them to leave. We must know as a public servant where they ventured in to get all those resources. Because sometimes you will realize that people make a lot of money. They are holding an office, public office, and they can't account for that money. I know there are people who have been snatched their properties by registrars. Others are untouchable, as the president has put it, in Ministry of Lands. So I think the step he has taken, if he could go for a very low person in the ministry, then I know very well he will go for the CSS, he will go for the PSS, and it is, I think, a clear indication that in the event that they go hayway and go out of the prescribed norms in the performance contract, as well as issues related to corruption and issues related to debt, the way he has come out very well is that business will not be as usual. He says he will look at issues of debt, because we will not want to have a lot of debt in this country. We already have a lot burden on ourselves. Number two, he says corruption will not move on. And there is a clear indication that the president is taking this country in the right direction, in that he's pointing out key issues that we always knew was a problem in terms of addressing it. At the top layer there, always the person who serves us used to be the person on the ground here, the lower cadres. Now the focus has moved to the higher cadres. So I think corruption is also one of the things he has looked at it very keenly in his discussion, and I tend to think if that is not just a hearsay, or is not just saying, and it is actualized, and it materializes in terms of making sure that it has been effected in every ministry, then I think there will be a lot of resources that will be reduced from wastage and come back to the government coffer and provide more effective services to the citizen of this country, whom he said we are all employed by the citizen of this country, because they are the taxpayers. I think the other thing, the ultimate taxpayers. And of course, there's one thing that made me spot in his speech. The president talked about issues of cost of living, job creation, and of course issues of prioritization of government response or priorities. I think at that point the president was not talking about the performance contract. He linked it, but he was trying to explain to the opposition who have been pointing out the cost of living versus government not doing anything. I think he has clearly elaborated in terms of what plans the government have in terms of reducing the cost of living. He has mentioned issues of electricity.
Yeah.
He has mentioned issues of productivity in terms of farming, reduction in fertilizers and those others. And of course, he applauded Kenyans the way they have gone into the farms, and we expect a lot of food to be produced. And if Kenyans are given opportunity, not selling their product outside the country, but this product is sold within the country, yes, Kenyans will have food on their table, and then, of course, they will have some money in their pocket. But now, who is supposed to do that? Of course, the person who is supposed to do that is the government. The government must put modalities in which farmers, once they have, produce their produces and bring it to the market, the government should, the cereal board should take all of them and give money to farmers and keep that food for purposes of using tomorrow when the droughts hits the country, because this is a phenomenon that will be continuous. There's only one other point I wanted to mention is in terms of the president pointing out issues of tax expansion. He said for us to provide proper services, he said we must also expand in our tax collection. I think Kenyans should pay tax. That is obvious, because if you want services, that is the point. But again, is the modalities in which we collect our tax efficient or effective? It is something that he mentioned also, that he will want to put everything in one coffer, and it is the Treasury and the Ministry of Interior that will be in charge, and all tax collected will go into one account. That way you are able to quantify the amount of money that comes in and minimize the leakages. I think the president has put up a lot of positive things, preempting what his team, the Kenya Kwanza team, who will be selected for the bipartisan talks, will go into table in terms of what is there for the nation, in terms of what is there for what the government is trying to do, so that they are able to achieve the maximum result.
Okay. Wakili, pick up the conversation from there. The cost of living, just like Daktari has clearly stated, the president took as the opportunity for that particular event to continue with the conversation of the cost of living, which has been the height of what the opposition has been calling for. Now, as we wait for the Kenya Kwanza team to bring up the list of leaders who will be attending that particular bipartisan talks, the newly appointed one, when it comes to the issue of the cost of living, the president has clearly stated they are on course. He has stated that the economic blueprint he laid out, him as well as his cabinet secretary are currently working. From where you sit, is that the case?
I couldn't speak for them authoritatively, but what I know for starters is that the issue of fertilizer, the subsidies to the farmers, is going to be a key plan in terms of delivering the cost of living coming down. Because Kenyans largely, when we talk about the cost of living when it comes to Kenya, is the issue of food and the issue of travel. So if those two things can be sorted, then the Kenyans will end up having a lower cost of living. So if food is going to be cheap, and you will maybe find a method or a formula around the issue of oil, because that is what caters for the food to be transported from the farmer to the miller and then back to the table of Kenyans who are going to eat. If that is going to be sorted, if that is well laid out to Kenyans, we are going to have the cost of living coming down. Other than that, also I will want to say that the aspect of tasking is ministers to ensure that the bureaucracy is cut down and they answer to the issues of Mwananchi. That is very key. You remember he said he was in Likoni and he was talking to the locals, and a local raised an issue which even tried to reach his own minister. He could not be able to reach him. That speaks to some kind of the larger than life which some of the ministers have been behaving like. Like even your own president can call you and you're just not, you're in the wind until the permanent secretary has got to be called. So basically it's trying to call them out that you guys have put you here to serve Mwananchi, to ensure that their needs are answered. And when ministry speaks to the locals, when government speaks to the local people, they get to understand the kind of challenges, so that they cut down on the red tape and the bureaucracy of sitting in Nairobi while you don't know what people in Turkana are going through. So that will be able to have a feel of what the Kenyans want, and then you can put in policies and measures which are at the end of the day going to serve this particular purpose of alleviating the hunger and of course eventually bring down the cost of living. So that is what it's trying to say. Don't hang in Nairobi, don't sit in your pretty offices, and then don't come to my meeting late and tell me that there's traffic. I've given you chase cars. Which traffic are you talking about? You knew that you were supposed to be here by some time. Why didn't you make it an effort of making it here? So it's trying to bring in the whole issue of sanity, right from attending his meetings and attending to the Kenyan needs. So that is, I think, something which is very clear. And then there's something also very important which Dr. has highlighted. The fact that he was able to tell the ministers that, you know, Kenyans have been complaining, this kind of ministers, we don't know whether they will perform because they look aloof. He said, if I happen to know more about your ministry than you know, then there's a problem. So he's basically tasking them, ensure that you work with the line ministry, state departments, engage in research, because your ministry is not just a ministry of sitting around and giving memos. It's also a ministry of trying to understand what are the needs of Kenyans. How best can we handle them? How best can we find these solutions? So that when you come to me, I don't seem to be the person knowing more than you. You do. Because I give you a task, you need to learn it. Learn it and do it. So that is eventually, I think, going to boil down to the cost of the way things are run, going to change. We have had years handled the issue of corruption, which is a big issue, because we cannot talk about the cost of living going down without dealing with the issue of corruption, because they are like conjoined twins. If corruption can be eliminated, or the red tape in government can be eliminated, eventually there's a lot of money which is lost. We are told it's 2 billion a day. If you can reduce that to maybe 100 million, then clearly you will have achieved.
We don't want, as Wakili has put it, we don't want any corruption, any money to be taken through corruption. Even 100 million is a lot.
It's still a lot.
So I think zero tolerance to corruption is the way to go.
Maybe as you respond, Wakili, Daktari, you've just heard what Wakili was saying. Cabinet secretaries up and about. You heard what Deputy President Rigathi Gachagua clearly stated, that the government it's cutting down on the cost of foreign trips. He said, we don't have a problem if you're up and about within the country. That is well and good. It's within your purview, serving Kenyans. Does this boil down to some of the promises already the government made on reducing the government expenditure when it comes to foreign trips?
Yes, it could be one step, a step towards reducing government expenditure. But again, you know, they were talking about regulating international trips. Yes. You know, international trips are extremely expensive, and they all fly business or first class, premier world, as they call it in the aviation world. And you know, one person being paid for a flight, return flight, over $4,000, that is over 500,000, just to take you a trip of 6 hours, 8 hours. How many of them are going on that trip, and how much that will cost? I think that is well understood in terms of cutting the cost of rather expenditures, government expenditures. But if we give them also a window for them to loiter around in the country, every part of this country, they will also going to do a lot of tours that will not yield any result. I think what the Deputy President was putting forward was that if you must make a trip, make a trip that will make an impact to the common people who have employed you. So what is it? If you fly from, for example, you are a minister here, you are CS in Nairobi, you are in charge of up to the corner, Turkana, Mandera, or even Loitoktok. If you fly to Mandera to go and address issues related to your ministry there, then that means you are making an impact in terms of, one, getting to know how your ministry works, even at the grassroots level, which was one of the indicator for the president in terms of checking your performance contract. Secondly, if you make a trip just because people are going for burials, or just because a friend of yours is wedding, or just because you are doing a Thanksgiving and at the cost of government coffer, then you are not making any sense. You better just continue flying outside the way you are doing. So I think what the Deputy President was trying to imply is that make trips that will be useful and helpful to the people who have employed us, and then making sure that the cost will not be as hefty as when you are making a foreign trip, and ensure that you make a priority in which kind of, the key word he has used is having a priority in terms of which kind of trip you should respond to. Otherwise, people will want to call you for their events, and those events does not necessarily mean it is useful to the people who have employed you. The other thing that we cannot differentiate in terms of whether you are going for a private event and you are using your resources, or whether you are going for official event and you are using government coffer, it becomes very difficult for one to differentiate that when you are a CS or a PS or a senior government official. Why? The vehicle you are using belongs to the government. Even if you fuel it, already there is a wear and tear. The security who are going with you are also paid by the government, the taxpayers. You know, where you sleep, of course, the security will be provided with when you go on that ground because of the state, the office you are holding. All those comes to cost. The cost is not only what you yourself spend. For example, if you fuel the car, you must be in a position to pay that month's salary, or those days that the team that have accompanied you, you must be in a position to pay their cost, so that cost is not transferred to the government. So because of that, and we cannot differentiate which cost is yours and which is not yours, then you are being told wisely select which kind of event or which kind of trip you choose to attend in order for you to have a maximum result on your efforts towards performing what task you have been given at areas of your jurisdiction. Now, you have been given also a leeway. Why should the president himself tell you, you are CS, you are the top, you know, you're from the CS, the president is only the deputy prime cabinet and the CS. You are the top cream. Why should you be told to prioritize your trips? That means that people don't care. There is a don't care attitude. It's a public malia umma, so people will want to just use it the way they want it. So I think those are the things he's capping, and I tend to think within that approach, a lot of frameworks will come in terms of how they're going to regulate foreign trips as well as even national trips within the country. So I tend to think the direction that today both the president and the deputy president have taken in terms of explaining what it entails, the performance contract. I think it's not what people were ritually thinking about, a ritual thing that needs to be just signed. It is something that obliged you, and it crosses across all aspects of your performance, including the people who will be accountable to your services. Who are the common wananchi, who are supposed to give you directions in terms of what you are supposed to do. For example, my brother, you may want to assess, you are a citizen of this country, you want to go and see a CS. You know, for you to see a CS, you will not even have an access to get to the floor that he is in, that office. And yet, you are the one who is paying him. I think access to the public should be also one of the things that the president should look at in terms of his senior officials, so that they listen to the common wananchi. There are those ones who will come for individual issues, there are those ones who will come for community issues, and there are those ones who may want to just come and give them information in regards to how best they are going to perform their job. It does not necessarily mean that once you are appointed a CS or a PS, you are super in terms of doing everything. That is why the president was saying, you have all the resources with you, learn from there, do research, let your team, technical team, empower you with all the information within that ministry, and then you are able to disseminate and advise the president on the actual things. If the president starts advising you within your ministry, just know you are on your exit in terms of reflecting on a performance contract.
Okay.
Thank you.
Let me head over to Wakili. Wakili, the president also took the opportunity to respond to the religious leaders. We have seen for weeks they have been calling on the president to forego the Finance Act 2023, and of course following that particular ruling by the Court of Appeal, we do know that the case is currently before the Supreme Court, awaiting Justice Martha Koome if she'll appoint a bench to hear that particular case, or it will be the Chief Justice herself leading that particular bench. The issue is, should we take that indication from the president that the government is not even thinking of altering the documents itself?
I think the president is just trying to steer clear that we are in court, let the courts decide, because much as the government was given a leeway to collect the monies, it does not mean that the act is now fully legal. Those are issues which are going to be argued in court. And I've spoken in various forums and said that, you know, at the end of the day, we are likely to have two scenarios. If the Okiya Omtatah side do prove that there's actually provisions of the law which were broken, especially the Constitution, the court cannot be able to whitewash that. It's not going to do some clear makeup on the same. It's actually going to say that those sections will be either be removed from the act, or will give a framework on how they should be handled. For example, if it's for example, let's just for argument's sake, let's say the housing tax now. Yes. If they realize that there's no clear framework of implementation of the same, and you cannot expend Kenyans' money without a clear framework, the court will suspend that for the moment and maybe give them a year to regularize. So once the laws are in place, then it will take off. So those are some of the provisions which are leeways which the court can be able to look into this act, so that at the end of the day we don't end up offending the law in the name of trying to collect taxes. So that one has got to be very clear. And it has been done. It's not like it's new. We have had sections of various acts being struck off. Some other acts have actually been rendered nugatory because most of the sections have actually been plucked off because they go against the provisions of the Constitution. So the premise under which Omtatah went to court was on that basis, that actually he had noted 6 areas, 6 or more areas which the Finance Act was actually offending the Constitution. So if Okiya Omtatah proves, because court works with proof, you don't just allege. If he proves vis-a-vis what the government is going to say, then eventually we'll have those sections being struck off, or recommendations being given that they can be suspended for the time being as awaits the government should, because you also need to also look at the intention of government. What is the intention? The intention might be good, but then the way you have framed it is strong. So you're given a chance to regularize. You saw the issue of KMC. When people went to court, when the former president gave it to the military, through a decree, through a Gazette notice. So among other things, the Gazette notice was said to be wrong, and there's no provision for that. They were told, we have to suspend that for now, but then we have given you a year to regularize that process. Either you come into, you take an act to parliament, a bill to parliament, it becomes an act, because a year is very long. You can be able to do that. And then now that becomes a clear, if that is what you want to achieve. Because it's not the work of the court to also derail everything the government wants to do. Because the government is not mad. They must have had some good intentions. So the court will be able to look at those intentions, and then be able to look at the law, and then be able to give the necessary recommendations. If they are those ones which are outrightly wrong, then they will be struck off.
I think as Wakili has put, go ahead.
I wanted to ask on the same issue, given that we do understand there will be now a joint committee between Azimio and Kenya Kwanza, and you do remember the bipartisan parliamentary committee led by Murungara as well as Otiende Amolo on the Azimio side. Azimio side clearly stated if there's going to be any political goodwill to bring them back to the table to discuss some of these pertinent issues facing Kenyans, maybe the government should review or place the Finance Act back to parliamentarians so that they can review that particular document from the standings of the president today, and we do know the case is in court. Do you think this will augur well with the committee that is set to sit?
Yeah, I think we shouldn't mix two things. One, the parliament have done their job, and that's why we took them there. And therefore they drafted a bill, the bill has been approved, and the president has accepted to it. Therefore, I think this does not allow other avenues to discuss. The avenue available only is where Wakili has mentioned it very well, that in the event that there is an issue in regards to the Constitution as well as the Act, then there are issues that needs to be identified, and if it requires a bit of amending or looking at it, that the Supreme Court will go in to decide on that. It has nothing to do with a bipartisan team. The bipartisan team were very clear on what they wanted. Although cost of living was not part of it, and it is just a way of just playing up with the mind of the common wananchi who have been put into the street to go and demonstrate, do destructions of other people's property, and of course others have been killed, police have been killed. They are trying to pull in this, but in the discussion there, as a politician,
yes.
I'm talking as a politician now, as a politician, when you look at the issues of discussion that has been tabled, it has nothing to do with the cost of living. For example, they say they want to review the election
the
Savas issues. They said they are looking at issues of
the reconstitution of IBC, the cost of living.
Cost of living is something which was just added, but
the
still
inclusivity.
Cost of living. Inclusivity.
Yes.
That's the point I was looking for. And when you look at it very keenly, we wouldn't have gone to demonstrate and cause all those chaos and even kill young men and women who, in the process of demonstrating, they had to lose their life. Those issues were earlier on mentioned that it is something that can be discussed within the boardroom, and it has been the wish of the government that if we discuss these issues in the boardroom, we are likely to get a good result than going to the street. So those bipartisan issues, discussions that will take place is looking for, the way it looks like, inclusivity. What do you mean by inclusivity in terms of you have been defeated? And the government is being run by people who have been elected by Kenyans. You went to court and everything has been sorted out. Supreme Court decided, agreed with IEBC that this government, Kenya Kwanza, is legitimately elected. So if you bring out again the same issue, for example, the server is open. Let's review the IEBC server. So the result shows that you have won. But what will that help you with? Because there's no way that the current government will reverse and say, because you won, then we give back the seat to you. So there are some things which are not very clear. So the bottom line, with all those things surrounded by the discussion, is I think inclusivity is the key thing which has come out. And that is Nusu Mukate government, which, if we go that direction, we will have a lot of problems. What problems? There will be no need of having elections in this country. If at any one time those two oppose each other, or the one who wins and the one who loses, both of them occupy an office, then there is no democracy. People who have talked about democracy, like the states, I mean, there are many of them, they talk about, we inherited the democracy issues from the states. And if democracy is all about the will of the people and making sure that the people they place for their leadership is the ones who are going to govern them, then there is no way again in a boardroom, the so-called bipartisan chat, that will going to change the whole tactics and have a government of inclusivity, which opposition and the ruling government will be doing the same work. So I think the bottom line is that they are trying to look for Nusu Mukate, and that I don't think if Dr. William Ruto will going to accept that in his government, and I don't think if he wants his future, I mean for 2027, his last term to be moved very well, we don't want anyone who has been defeated to come into the government. Let them bring suggestions on how they want to improve the life of Kenyans through the so-called cost of living. Let them come up with a roadmap outside the roadmap that the KK government has given out. Thank you.
Given that we have run out of time, and of course we are eating into the time of Tamrini, I can see my colleague Nancy Okware already in the studio. Let me come to you, Wakili, just a few seconds. Just give us your final remarks as to what pertained to the speech made by the president.
I think I'm a happy Kenyan, and I'm happy that the president is really rising up to the occasion of what Kenyans expect out of him, because Kenyans voted for him. It's no longer about now elections. I don't think there's anybody disputing the election or this election. It's his time to work, and he has laid out the plan. Now, what I'm anticipating to see is now seeing the president now give a roadmap, a blueprint of what he expects to achieve, or what we should expect him to achieve, and how that is going to boil down to helping Kenyans and making the Kenyans' life, Kenya, a livable place. And then the other option, the other one is, of course, to see prosperity for our country.
Okay, thank you, Daktari.
Mine is just one. I think the president has mentioned two critical things that made me happy. There are Kenyans who have become poor because of doing business for the government, and they have failed to pay them for years, the pending bills. And now that he has said we must come up with measures to reduce pending bills. I think that's a very critical thing, and we applaud that, and we will support him towards that, so that Kenyans who have used their money and they have been out of the market or business now can come back to business. The other one is stalled projects. I think we have a lot of structures everywhere in this country, the so-called the government project or the white elephants. And every other person, whenever you occupy the office, as if the government is new, you are the one who is new when you are employed or when you are elected in certain office. But the government project is not new. And therefore, he said also he wants to see all stalled projects completed within this year. And he has allocated funds for that. And that's also another great thing, that the face of the government will going to be changed.
Okay.
I think that is the only thing I will say in terms of all the others that we have already
okay. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. That is Dr. Isaac Hassan, a political analyst as well. To his left is Gibson Gisore, constitutional lawyer. Of course, the president has said a lot more we could have discussed, but we are out of time. Unfortunately, if you're just joining us, that was the conversation that was precipitated by the speech made by President William Ruto at State House this particular morning. And this afternoon, the conversation will be carried on into Tamrini by my colleague Nancy Okware, who's already here in the studio. And of course, do stay for that particular speech that is coming up, as well as the debunking of what the president has touched on. He has touched on numerous issues, from the corruption issue to the developments that are geared to start off in later. Of course, he has told the cabinet secretaries to finish those particular projects. He called them the white elephant projects by the end of this particular year. My name has been Abdiaziz Hashim for this particular morning on News Check, and my co-anchor this lovely afternoon has been Lensa Odingo. Do stay tuned for Tamrini. It's up next.